Hello everybody, this is Jehoiadak Maccabeus Everyday Survival. Hope everybody's doing alright out there. This is going to be the second installment on the series, This is Still America, Act Accordingly. This part 2 is going to be called the Jericho Theory. Back in 2005, there was a TV show run for a season and a half called Jericho. And the premise of the show was a orchestrated attack by parts of our deep shadowy government. It involved 24 suitcase nukes to make it appear that some other country had done it, and or I don't even know that was the context of why they did it. It might have been to overthrow the portion of the ruling government. It's real hard to know all of it because they cut the show off partway through season 2 after governments started coming back. There were 6 different governments set up power that was claiming to be the legitimate power. All had a military, all had executive and legislative positions, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, this show takes place in a rural town in Kansas called Jericho. Probably, I'm guessing, less than 5,000 people. And the closest one that went off was Denver. And of course it knocks out the grid and everything. They knew that an attack of some kind had happened. And anyway, Johnston Green, he wasn't the main character, but he had one of the leading roles in the show. He was the mayor. He had been the mayor for 25 years. And he was, I'm thinking he was like 75th Rangers, served in Vietnam. And there was an election due to come up right that fall after the attacks. The attacks happened in that 9th month. But anyway, as the mayor, he resumed responsibility as the mayor and accountability for his people. Because, you know, we can store and we can prepare, but most of the rest of everybody out there that didn't, still going to look to government to solve their solutions. And it's a very good show. I'm not going to go into all the details of it. I don't want to run it for anybody. But there was a guy who was like a local criminal, had been to prison, probably in his 40s or 50s, I'm guessing. His name was Jonah. And he had some road gangs. And after this collapse, he was doing stuff out there, you know, for supplies, and I kind of set up a black market type thing. But one of his second-hand man orchestrated a murder and framed it on Jonah. And Jonah was ended up being apprehended. And the new mayor had taken control at that time through elections. They still had their elections. And he had a whole different mindset. He was kind of a narcissist. But him and a couple of the deputies were going to take this guy out, you know, just out behind the woodshed and pop his ass without a trial or anything. And Johnston Green, who was still very much concerned about the citizenry and the well-being of the town, even though he wasn't the mayor anymore, stepped in, and him and his sons, and confronted the new mayor about it. And he made a speech in there, and that's where I got the part of This is Still America, Act Accordingly. Because they was going to hang this guy, or get rid of this guy, based on rumor and hearsay, instead of giving him a fair trial, you know, evidence brought forward and such. And it ended up that it all come about what really happened, and I'm not going to ruin the show for you. And he made it in this speech that Johnston Green made. He said, you know, it's easy to do, things are easy to do when things are easy. I'm paraphrasing. It's when it's hard, it's when things are hard that it really counts for what you're doing, or something like that. And you know, right now we have a system in place that where people are given somewhat fair trials. I'm sure, I know not everybody's got a fair trial in this country, but predominantly we have a system of justice that allows a man to be in front of a jury of his peers and to face his accusers and blah, blah, blah. And one of the things I find kind of concerning is the way that people nowadays will convict somebody out based off rumor or news reports. I'll give you an example. Several years ago, it's probably been 7 years ago, when I was still in Iowa. I'd lived in Iowa for a few years when I was in the Carpenters Union, building data centers for the government, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, Google. But there was this guy, and he had done an ambush on some law enforcement in Des Moines. And the guy was guilty, but, you know, nobody knew he was guilty. It made the news, and he became a person of interest, and the media dug into his past and all this and made him out to be guilty. I mean, people were chomping at the bit to hang this guy, and he hadn't even been to trial yet. This was just 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, probably less than a few days. And I was sitting there with my uncle, and he was railing on about this evil guy. And I said, well, I'm not going to cast judgment on him yet. He hasn't had a jury trial, you know, before a jury of his peers, and the evidence hasn't been brought forward. I'm not going to convict him just because the news says he's guilty. Well, we all know he's guilty. And we may know that a person is guilty, but they have that right. That's part of our human rights, as spelled out in our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And understanding all that, you also ought to read the Federalist Papers. But anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked. I do see that local governments, especially in the more rural areas, are going to maintain positions of power and control or whatever. I don't see that, whether it's an economic collapse or whatever you want to, whatever scenario you want to throw into it. I don't see that all local government's going to collapse. And not here in my area. I know who most people are here in my area. I live in a county that's a population density of 7. It might be up to 8 by now. It's been a few years since I looked it up. But, you know, I have no doubt that the sheriff's still going to be the sheriff. And another thing that happened, well, I don't want to get too sidetracked here. I can see that local governments are probably going to still maintain control and look out for the well-being of the areas that they were elected to take care of. That sheriff's position does not end just because the grid goes down. But also in that show, there was another town some miles away, and they end up having a skirmish or a border war with this other town. And at the main battle between these two towns is when the other government, or one of the forms of standing federal government, stepped in, and they called it a border skirmish, and there was an investigation into the murders and the fight, and that last battle cost 136 lives or something like that. And so when people think that it's just going to be an all-out free-for-all, don't believe it, people. Don't get your mind trained to that mindset, because there's a very highly likely chance that the powers that be are still there, that they just haven't showed themselves, and the smaller powers that be are going to be the ones running things until the bigger powers step in with their militaries and regain control. And there's just a whole lot of fantasy in the prepper world. I hope all this makes sense to you. I'm going to get off here. I'm getting up over 10 minutes now. Go check out Jericho if you feel so inclined. It's a real good miniseries. I know it's Hollywood. There's some reality mixed in with it, though. But y'all stay safe. Have a good day. God bless America. And I'll talk to you later.